Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our joint use attachment webinar. We're very excited to have you here. Before we get started, just a quick housekeeping note. Feel free to drop any questions you have into the Q&A chat box. It should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen there as we go through the presentation. And we're going to leave time at the end to go through all of them. So let me start by introducing today's speakers. Charlie Nobles leads TerraGo's utility and smart infrastructure sales initiatives, bringing extensive expertise in AMI, smart grid modernization, and connected lighting solutions, shaped by leadership roles at Ubiquia, Sensus, and Duke Energy, where he drove large-scale grid and metering transformations across the US and Europe. Jeff Ross serves as the Vice President of Enterprise Solutions at TerraGo, bringing more than 25 years of experience helping utilities and municipalities deploy and scale smart city infrastructure through expertise in IoT, smart lighting, smart grid modernization, wireless communications, and utility operations. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Charlie to kick things off.
Thank you, Madison, and thank you folks for joining in to hear a bit about what we think about this important area of joint use operations for anyone who owns poles. So before we get started, you might not know anything about TerraGo. So TerraGo is an enterprise software platform solution provider that serves many major cities and utilities with our solutions. And we map and we manage all aspects of um, field workflows across the enterprise into back office systems integrated with devices they're deployed in the field. And we serve 9 of the 10 largest utilities today in large cities like Chicago and Philly. We have focused most of our devices under management around grid devices, streetlight outdoor lighting solutions, and have over 10 million streetlights alone under management with our platform. However, today we're going to talk about another key area that is important to any pole owner, whether it's a muni, a co-op, an IOU, a city directly, and it's this idea of joint use operations. And we're going to talk about the full lifecycle control of how you manage this fleet of critical assets that are creating revenue or losing revenue for you. So let's go to the next slide and jump into the topic. So this is not new news, but pole attachment volume is literally exploding. And you see on the left of this screen some of the reasons why. There's so many new and diverse devices that are being placed onto poles. Poles are the absolute most important area, the easiest area, the best location for attaching many of these sensors and devices. So this is a good thing, right? Because you charge revenue for those attachments if you know they're there. So let me give you some factoids I think that are staggering for the size of the market, but also the opportunity for revenue, but the opportunity for lost revenue. First of all, there are somewhere between 150 and 200 million pole attachments in the US, growing at 4 to 6% per year. That's a huge number. But the backlog of unbilled assets is also growing. In fact, that's growing faster. And we're going to talk a bit about why that is. So if you look at the total number of attachments, that represents somewhere between $3 and $5 billion per year in attachment revenue captured by the pole owner. But there are many issues that are creating problems of how to manage this revenue generation machine that utilities and cities are sitting on and trying to sort out and create processes around. New attachments that involve paperwork or manual processes or spreadsheets, they're not automated. Emergency restoration work that's done every day, every storm, that changes the nature of what's actually out there in the field, and records may not be updated. And the extreme cost of doing a boots on the ground audit of everything that's out there. So you have two issues. One issue is revenue leakage, which is a fancy word for the fact that somewhere between 5 and 10% of all these attachments are not captured. If they're not captured by the utility, then they're not being billed for. It's free rent. The second thing is, which is another concern, is this idea called revenue capture lag. It takes somewhere between 9 to 12 months on average for utilities and cities to actually go from the point at which someone has requested an attachment to the point where it's actually on the pole and they're being billed. 9 to 12 months of revenue lag and the additional cost that that represents and lost revenue as well. So when you look at this whole picture, it's a wonderful opportunity for improvement to capture lost revenue, reduce the time to revenue, which is a critical metric in this business, and actually recover revenue directly in many ways. We're going to talk about why that is. Why do we have the lost revenue? Why do we have this lag in revenue capture? What can we do about it? So this is being highlighted, and there are many approaches being taken, but they're disparate point solutions. So let's go to the next slide and see
Sure,
if we
Charlie.
can
Just
unpack
one additional
this.
comment on this is, this is
Sure.
a very small list of the types of third-party attachments that we're certainly seeing or that our customers are telling us about that they want to track. It's going to continue to explode with a lot of different types of devices on here. I've noticed, throughout my history, generally people talk about joint use, they instantly go to things like overhead fiber. Obviously, that falls in this category, but there's so many other devices that go on poles that aren't these big, long, drawn out, engineering projects that require, audits and compliance and NESC compliance. These types of devices can be attached much, much quicker, and a lot of times they don't have any pole loading impact whatsoever on utility poles or streetlight poles. But this list here is just kind of a quick sample. I mean, we've also seen people identify like retrofit solar as another type of attachment that would go on a typical grid light, but now they want to turn it to solar. So this list, I think, is just cutting the surface of all the different types of attachments we'll see here in the future. So going from that kind of in the next slide, why don't you talk about kind of the main revenue control issues that we're seeing? You touched on a few already.
Right. So one of the key revenue control issues is that there is no real um, system of record. The data lives in all these places you see on the right of the screen. It's fragmented. These systems don't necessarily sync, or they don't sync within the same time lag with each other. So two systems that sync at different times means that any one time they're not synced at all. So there's lack of a system of record where systems are still present. They still have their part to play in the data capture, but there's one place where all of the pull attachment data is captured and it's up to date. That's kind of an issue that we try to address at TerraGo with this idea of a system of record, not replacing the other systems, but it is a system that is integrated and synced with these other systems in real time. So this is kind of a critical area. I would say that if you don't have a system of record, then you don't really have a system that you can trust. We're going to talk about each of these in some detail, but to get through all these different aspects, I'm sure there'll be things we don't uncover. So be thinking about your pain point as we touch on your pain point. Give us a question in the Q&A and we'll address it at the end.
I think we've heard so many horror stories already from, customers in terms of how they're actually doing joint use today from a management standpoint. And it's the bottom of the right-hand slide is a good way to describe it. It's just kind of, in my perspective, kind of operational chaos. I mean, it starts off with an application that comes across as a PDF document. Well, now they got to take that, get that into some other format. They've got emails going back and forth with a potential attacher. They've got engineering documents that are stored on OneDrive and other shared services. There's no single repository for them to go and look at to see what the status is or where the documents are. So that's what we're about to address now. It's that chaos, how to get that under control.
Right, right.
And here's the
So again, I
first
kind
way.
of, and I, I talked about the system of record. We kind of led into this. So imagine that you had a centralized, connected one source of truth. I mean, that's a phrase easy to throw out, but it's actually much harder to render a one source of truth, one pane of glass view for your specific pole attachments. And that's one of the things that we have focused on at TerraGo, because we do that for our other fielded assets. We do that across enterprises for streetlights and other grid assets on a regular basis at scale. So this is kind of the one prerequisite I would say is, and ask yourself, do you have a system of record for your joint use operations? If the answer is no, or I'm not exactly sure, that probably denotes that that's an opportunity for you. Next
Yeah,
slide, please.
the only other comment kind of on this is I think what we've also learned is, unlike other core utility assets where there is a system of record, be it a GIS or asset management system, or obviously things like a work order management system, a billing system. When you talk about joint use, because the data around joint use lives in all these different locations, but also is in these applications and these
Mhm.
spreadsheets, that there isn't really a source of truth around joint use operations and management. How do you manage a joint use program? And so that's what our first recommendation is that you got to have a single source of truth to really manage this stuff. And although there are certain software programs that are out there that kind of are used in this, they're not purpose built or purposely configured for how a utility actually does their joint use operation, their processes, their workflows, their approval cycles. And so that's about what we're about to talk about next is really going from all these disparate systems. If you get it to one system to have that single source of record, how would your operations actually improve?
Right. So what we thought we'd do is just overly simplistically show the whole attachment life cycle. The point here is that this system of record has to encompass the whole life cycle. One of the issues, though, and I think this is kind of an aha moment, is there's sub processes between each one of these. In fact, there are times when you want to finish one part of the life cycle and automate pushing to the next level, or whoever's got to do the next part of this. But there's also queued areas in between where data is captured, data has to be reviewed by someone, physically looked at, approved. Maybe some go back into earlier stages in the life cycle, some get pushed forward. So there are, even if you have automation between how you get data from one part of the process to the other, you could have manual intervention in between these circles, which that alone creates a lack of automation. Automation between these is actually not enough if you've got manual processes in between that have to be reviewed by someone, checked off, and you could have significant delays between them. So we're going to present this picture of the full life cycle. And to be honest with you, it's not complete until you're billing the customer. And sometimes even there could be a two or three billing cycle lag before that actually starts to send a bill. There's pre-rental for 2 or 3 billing cycles is not uncommon in this space, which is another part of revenue loss. Review and approval processes. How can we accelerate this process? Now, one of the reasons that it is slow in this area is because of lack of visibility. Because this is where sometimes the queue builds up, a paper is put in front of someone at their desk, they review them in order, maybe no prioritization of the processes from the requesters. And at any one point in time, if you had to say, what's the status of that request? Could you find it? Is it on someone's desk? Is it ready for review or approval, or something in between where it's been reviewed but something's missing? So the idea here is if you don't have a process, a platform that includes the full review and approval processes, automates it where it can, applies business logic that can actually pre-approve some of the requests without having to be seen if they meet certain criteria, well, then you're missing some opportunity from automation and for accelerating this process. This has got to be done, but the trick is how can you do this more efficiently and faster. Let's go to the next slide. So the infamous make-ready reviews and approvals. And as Jeff said, some attachments require a more in-depth review of and modifications to the pole for loading conditions, for space considerations. Utility poles sometimes much more complex than streetlight poles, which typically limit the number of attachments and so don't have to consider as many of the weight loading, wind loading issues that a utility pole might have. So you can have big disparities between those two types of attachments. But nonetheless, reviews have to be done, and nothing's more frustrating than to send data to someone to review and there's something missing. And there's got to be a request to go back in the process, to iterate back, to capture something that just wasn't pushed forward. Data was incomplete. The reviewer can't make the decision. Other steps have to be taken. They're oftentimes manual. So capturing and making sure nothing gets pushed to review until certain minimum criteria are met, which can be different for different assets. One asset could require much more data to be captured to push to review than another type of asset. Can your system configure and customize around that? Or do you find yourself using a system intended for fiber overlay that has 84 categories of questions to be answered, and you just need to answer 4 or 5, yet you have to use this cumbersome, somewhat brittle process to push it through? That's another issue of the lack of customization with one tool that does all types and can't be easily configured. So there is a huge opportunity right here in this. I mean, this is meat and potatoes of what has to happen, but it can be done better. And our platform, the TerraGo platform, has worked hard to provide visibility to what's missing, all the data records, write business rules around what data is required for this type of attachment, for this requester versus that one, so you can streamline the process through this kind of critical area.
I think that the horror stories that we've certainly heard, Charlie, are the attachers trying to get a hold of a human at the utility. What's the status of my application? What's going on? I've submitted everything. Oh, it was it's in an email. Oh, it's sitting with an engineer who'll get to it someday. They don't have visibility into providing concrete information back to the attacher. And a lot of times it's because the attacher didn't do everything correctly. So, Charlie, as you mentioned, what the interesting thing inside of TerraGo is you can actually dynamically and really create requirements like make-ready documentation requirements attached to a specific type of device that will be put on the pole. So, a surveillance camera, what are the requirements of the documents is very, very different than, for example, let's say a 4 or 5G small cell. That's a
Right.
much more complicated installation. So you can't treat those two things as equal. So you need to easily be able to communicate to the attacher, well, this is what you want to attach at this location. Here's the documents that you need to provide to get to the engineering approvals from a make ready standpoint, which gives you the go ahead to go out and install it. So that's the important thing. Again, I think between this is not treating every type of attachment as the same. It's not. You need to specifically create the workflows and the documents required based off of that pre-approved attachment type that you as a utility have already agreed to.
And one of the parts that we're going to touch on in the demo, but I'll mention it here because you kind of led up to it, Jeff, is how fast can you process the request? And to your point, if the request is of this category of attachment, imagine it generating the platform generating the proper questions to be answered, not just the list of 84 questions that every requester gets, which half of them may not even be applicable. I mean, how tedious is it for the requester to, in an automated sense, go through just the questions needed to be answered or the data needed for that type of attachment for that type of requester and configuring around the front end that feeds the beast, which is the requester makes the request. We're going to talk about that, some ways that we think can greatly improve that. So you're actually processing the incoming request and making sure you don't miss key data that you have to go back to the requester to get. So let's go to this part. And this is the This is actually the part that is um, oftentimes overlooked if you have a solution, a software solution that doesn't consider field application. So I can tell you that at TerraGo, we are a platform first, mobile first enterprise software solution. Because to be honest with you, that fellow there in that picture, that's where field truth is captured. That's where you see what really is in the field. No matter what GIS says is in the field, what is actually in the field. You see the true condition of the pole. You find poles that need to be remediated for other reasons that can't accept another attachment. So having a mobile first solution as part of your platform, and Jeff will show this in the demo, how critical this is, that leads the field inspection person through, again, only the attributes they must capture to complete a proper field inspection for that type of pole and for that type of attachment. And it can vary. So, and how it's not just how fast are they going through unnecessary steps, unnecessary clicks for what they're trying to do. That's a productivity play. That's a part of it. But also, that's the one place to capture the field truth and all of the field truth that's needed to process that. So you don't have to go back out to the field because something was omitted and missed. So again, the TerraGo platform is a mobile first application, so you can configure what that person is seeing specific for the attachment request, specific for the type of attachment. So you've got to capture that one time in the field and get it right the first time.
I've actually seen examples where, an attacher, submitted everything, went through the whole process, got approved. Everything was good. They went out, they installed it. And then weeks later, when the internal utility field crew does a quick audit check to make sure everything's in compliant. He gets out there and the attacher installed it on the wrong pole. They installed it on the streetlight pole, the next one over. So now you've got two records in your system that are wrong. You've got one pole that says it has an attachment on it doesn't, another one that says it has no attachment, it actually does. Seems like a simple thing, but those kind of little mistakes do happen quite a bit. And so be
Mm-hmm.
able for the auditor to get out there and go, well, these things are screwed up. Oh well, what can I do about it? Well, they can do everything about it with TerraGo. They can actually make all the modifications with inside the TerraGo app to actually move that attachment to the correct pole. And then that information comes back with TerraGo, and TerraGo then would update the other disparate systems, be it GIS or asset management, for what the field person, the ground truth, the field truth that Charlie mentioned of what really is happening out there. So for us, we're very much, as Charlie mentioned, field first. You can look at all the data in the whole world, but it's the guy who's standing in the pole can actually tell you what's going on. So
Right.
important aspect of the overall solution.
Well, you start stealing my thunder there, Jeff,
Okay.
because the point is, many times it goes right, and even if you configure the right questions, the right things as part of a successful inspection, there'll be things that aren't right in the field. And so, what do you do when you have a work order to complete these four fields, validate these four attributes, and you get out there and realize, this isn't going to work? Does that field first application allow the customizations to say cannot complete work order as stated? Why? Reason why? And have, like, for instance, what if a pole is found that belongs to the utility or the city, but it's just not in GIS? Can you capture that, capture the salient information, push that in, and create a record in GIS? Can you go to the pole in this case and find out, well, guess what? The records say there's already two attachments, no space for any more. Um, or there's one attachment, there's space for one more, and there's actually two on the pole. You've got two issues. One is that requester gets a no, you can't attach to this preferred location. And then you've got to chase down, well, which one of these two is the improper one? So does your field first application support when things are not as they seem in the field? When your field truth does not line up with what you have in your back office systems, can it actually capture it there and update it? Or are you sending another body out to do a second visit to make the necessary changes? It needs to be done at the point where you're standing at the pole. That's the best location to capture it. That's also the best location to not queue that data up, but to send it back immediately in real time to the back office systems. The more lag between the capture of field data, truth, and when it's updated in back office systems, the more opportunity for error or that it never makes it back. So that's a not trivial point, is detecting unauthorized issues. And then, of course, you've got your QA and compliance. At some point in life, everything gets audited. And you need to be able to audit for several reasons. Uh, a requester asks, where am I in the process? It's been 3 months now. Can you tell me do you have everything? Because I don't want to wait 3 months and find out, oh yeah, you forgot to fill out this piece of information. Or what if you're looking at your own productivity? You're trying to improve your time to revenue. Do you have a method by which you could audit through your process, make sure everything is done the first time correctly? Or how many times is it not done the first time? Do you have a capture of that? Can you show that? For any explicit attachment request, can you show a complete audit trail back to the day it was first requested, through every process, how long it took, who did that piece of work, what data was pushed forward, so that if anyone asked a question like, why is that up there, you could give a complete record of the audit trail for that attachment. That's actually not just belt and suspenders. That's actually required for proper governance.
I think one of the stories that keeps resonating to me about this process is that, again, you can do everything right from submitting your application, supplying all of the make-ready documentation. You can do everything right. The attacher gets the approval, go ahead and install. They install it, but then that's never communicated back to the utility. So there's no billing start date, right? With the field first approach, the actual installer, the engineering services company, they actually, once they're installed, need to actually, with inside of the TerraGo interface, acknowledge that it's been installed. For example, you might have a requirement to, okay, you've got a market installed. Are there any comments or conditions? Or is there vegetation issues? Is there anything that you need to explain to us about the installation location? And more importantly, you hit done and you hit save, and that gives it a timestamp, right? And that timestamp then becomes the trigger with inside TerraGo to basically hit the billing system to initiate a billing cycle, or whatever your process happens to be. If there's a manual intervention process where still there's a human needs to review it before going billing, that can be implemented as well. But I think that's the piece that I've learned so much about, is you can do everything right, but if you don't capture the actual install date, the time and stamp, when do you start billing? And that's where that revenue leakage comes in, where you go months and months at a time thinking that you're charging somebody for that lease based off the lease agreement that they signed. But in practicality, you aren't charging anybody yet. So they're getting free attachment life. So that's where you've got to be able to have that audit trail at all times to be able to go back and make sure that indeed the last step is actually happening. You're billing them.
Right. Next slide. So we talked several times about this integration to your back office systems, integration to GIS, integration to asset management, integration to billing that Jeff just mentioned. Well, integrations denote IT involvement. They note work to be done to make sure those integrations are secure for data transfer. Are they batched integrations? Are they one-way integrations where you're extracting data from a system of record and putting it out? Or you're actually having two-way integration where you extract data, but if the data is different or updated, it can be pushed back into the back office system. Our TerraGo platform is not intended to replace your GIS system, your billing system, your asset management system, your outage management system, et cetera. It's intended to integrate with them. And we have years of experience in creating commercial integration connectors into the 7 or 8 primary GIS systems out there in the market, and the same for asset management and billing systems and customer relationship systems, et cetera. And we maintain those 24/7 because our solution is in the cloud. So we integrate with those systems We maintain the sync of the integration 24/7 with those systems so that they are always up and running and validated so that field truth can be pushed immediately to a back office system. In fact, we recommend that that type of data is not queued, is not batched, is presented immediately in real time so that no lag happens between field truth and back office systems. But this image could get a lot busier because there are a lot more systems than what you see, but we have extensive experience in integrating with large utility and city back office systems and maintaining that commercial connector for repurpose to make sure it always has an uptime. That's kind of a critical issue. If you break the integration and you have to batch all the data, it's at some point you're going to have corrupted data, lose data. So integration is not trivial. TerraGo actually augments IT networks, meaning that instead of placing this technical debt burden onto IT, oh yes, now we have this platform, you need to go build these custom integrations. We relieve a lot of that work from IT organizations by saying, no, we already have a commercial integration. We will work with you. We will maintain our integration to your system, right? And so you don't have to service that technical debt. And that frees up IT to do those other high value things you'd like for them to do.
Great. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, it's a great explanation. For those of you who might not be familiar with the term iPaaS, which is on the second bullet here, it's integration platform as a service. This is exactly what Charlie's talking about as a connector. You know, old school IT, when you say integration, they think hundreds of thousands of dollars of hiring a system integrator who's going to take months and months at a time to actually integrate this stuff. That's exactly opposite of what we do. We already have these commercial connectors with all these different systems we've already done. Yes, they need to be customized specifically for your environment, meet all of your IT security requirements as well, but it's already done. What we've got to do is just, again, repurpose those commercial connectors for a utility specific environment. So what would take a system integrator months to write RESTful APIs from scratch, we actually move to full commercial implementation on integration within weeks. And it also can be set up according to what the program is actually at. You know, let's say you've got 4 or 5 different systems that have to be integrated. Well, based off of your rollout of TerraGo, you don't have to do all 5 up front. It could be based off of where you're starting in phase 1. Well, phase 1 is about improving our location information, where our poles are at. Well, okay, GIS probably needs to get updated.
Sure.
So you can actually stagger these over time. But it's this important thing when you say integration, a lot of time people on the business side are like, oh no, that means IT. I don't want to do that. We do all the heavy lifting as Charlie mentioned in order to make that process as easy as possible for your IT organizations.
Now, speaking of heavy IT technical debt and burden, the other one that causes people to have cold sweats is when you say, you know, I need to change. I need to change that workflow. I need to change how that data is presented on the field, the handheld device in the field. I need to change uh, how we are approving and routing that. And changes sound like change orders, which sound like pain in cost and time. Yeah, that 6 to 9 months I mentioned that typically it takes to get from request to build attachment, how much of that is this IT technical debt in between? One of the things that TerraGo does and has done very successfully is we've developed a platform that requires and allows for customization without new code development. That sounds almost like a misnomer. How can that be? But it's through the way our platform is configured from the start and refined is through this idea of a configuration capability where you can, oh, you want to change and add 2 more fields to what the field inspector sees and has to fill out. Oh, that's a configuration change. The engine is already behind it, ready for adding configurations. You want to rename that. You want to change your symbology on your map. That's a configuration change. That's not a change order that has to go to IT for coding. That's a configuration change. And our platform cost, our integration as a service across the platform, typically rolls in one price so that if you have 8 change changes necessary that require configuration or 18. It does not matter. You don't pay for every single thing you need to reconfigure or modify when you see a better way. That's just part of configuration. Love to talk to you more about what that means. It sounds almost too good to be true, to be honest. It does. But call us and we'll walk you through how we do this. We'll be able to show you a little bit of that in the demo, but really to see the full value of how can you do integrations in weeks, not months? How can you change what I want to see on this hardened field tablet in 4 days? And now I've got these three more fields there, and you're capturing the data and sending it back. How can you do that? It's through configuration, not custom coding. So I'll just leave you with that little Christmas present. We'll hopefully hear back from you to see if we can explain exactly how we do that.
Charlie, I guess the only other thing to add to that, which I often point out, is if you take all of our, all of our utility customers, co-ops, muni customers, you take all of them, they're all using the exact same TerraGo platform, but not one instance of how it's implemented is the same. It's everyone is different because it's specifically built upon their processes, their terminology, their language, and their symbols of what does that asset symbology or color need to look like that's going to resonate with my field crews. So, Charlie, you're directly right. Everything in the platform is configurable, but I think that's an important thing to note that when you get into joint use, I would say it's even more fragmented because all of those internal processes of how to manage joint use were more likely invented or created internally. So everybody we've talked to definitely has a different process. They use different terminology, and so they need the system to be able to adapt to, again, how they actually do work.
Right.
Great.
So let's go one more slide here, then we'll move to the demo. We'll try to kind of bring life to some of these concepts we've been talking about. So we just went through this very quickly. We hit the high points. We hit most of the pain points. We talked about this idea of time to revenue, of revenue loss, revenue capture lag, manual processes, lack of automation, disparate systems to be integrated with. And we kind of presented to you this idea of a platform first, a platform that can help and can be configured and customized for exactly what your asset classes are that you are managing and what business logic you want to apply to automate this process from cradle to grave, right? Just full life cycle control. So we've talked about it. We'd love to talk to more to you about it. If you have particular pain points or something I said or something Jeff said resonated with you, this is an issue. You're looking for a simpler solution, a faster solution that would fit your needs better. Please give us a call. Now we're going to have a demo. Jeff's going to take up for the demo, and then we're going to open up for Q&A.
Great. All right, Charlie, let's switch over to that. Charlie, can you confirm you can see our
Yes,
user
I see
interface?
it.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. All right. A little bit of a demo for you. This is not a demo of a customer's commercial environment for joint use. This is a generic kind of demo platform so you can understand the different concepts kind of built into this at a high level. Let me just start off to make sure you understand what you're seeing on your screen here. On one side, this is my mobile phone. Okay. I'm going to move around the map there. So the mobile application that would be used by not only the attacher, but it'd be used by the installer. It's also used by really the joint use management team as well, the field crews that are going out there to audit, to do compliance. So it's an application used for really anybody who needs to be out in the field to capture information. The interesting thing about the TerraGo platform as well is that everything on our platform is based on users and roles, which means that we define what the roles are of the system, who's going to use the system, and then what access do they need information to. So, for example, the attacher who's submitting the application, well, they only need a little bit of information. They need poll information, location information. They need the forms that they need to fill out. They need the instructions on what to upload. That's all they really kind of need. So in TerraGo, when they log in, that's the only thing that they're going to have access to. Versus the management team on the joint use, when they log in, they're going to have access really to all of the data. What we've talked about in this presentation is that single pane of glass or that source of truth, the record. Everything will be available to them. So the mobile application is usually always a subset, right? Smaller screen of what you can actually do in there versus the mobile application, excuse me, the web application, which is on the other side of the screen, the left side. This is the full web app that you get to from a browser. And I've actually got two kind of versions up here. One version that you're seeing right now, this would represent what the attacher would see, the person who wants to submit an application. There's another version, which over here I'll go through, which has a lot more detail into it. You can probably see this data table below. It's the exact same map, the exact same information, but this is where the joint use management team at the utility, they would log in and get access to all the information. So let me come over here and I'll kind of start from an attacher's point of view. So the attacher, if you can see here, I've got just a set of streets with a whole bunch of poles on it. That's what they're looking at right here. You can set these color codes up and symbols up to be, again, anything that you want to. But if I'm an attacher and I'm looking to attach, let's say, a surveillance camera, they would actually go into this interface, see this map, right? They can navigate to exactly the street, the pole that they want to. And by the color codes, they can quickly kind of know what's available and not available. So let me do something really simple by click on this green pole right here in the center. And what that did is it popped up this little card here to the left. And what that basically says is, hey, this pole is available. You can actually submit an application for an attachment on this pole. Where another color, for example, let's say this purple one, this says it's reserved. Well, that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean that there's already a pending application for an attachment on that pole, for example. So you can actually submit it. Or we've certainly seen plenty of requirements where the number of that attachments are actually limited. So let's say that streetlight pole is only allowed to have two types of attachments. Well, there's already two on there, so you can't put anything else on that pole. So it can mean a lot of different things based off of, again, your requirements. There's a third one in this example, which is these ones that say X, where it says not available. And what we see with these is it can be anything from, yeah, it's already got an attachment on it, or maybe it's in a location where an attachment shouldn't be. Maybe there are other things on that pole, so they don't want any more attachments on that. But what it also could be is, well, that attachment, meaning that pole, doesn't actually belong to the utility. That's a city pole, or that's a co-op pole, or that's a county pole. It belongs to somebody else. I think one of the things, again, we've heard a lot of is that the utilities receive applications for a joint use, and the pole, they don't own the pole. So with inside this environment, you could actually start to plot or bring in information from your neighboring cities and counties into this information. So when somebody's looking to actually do an attachment, but it's not a utility-owned pole, they can actually get direction around where should they actually go file that application or to get on that pole because it doesn't belong to the utility. So it gives you that kind of basic information from inside here. A lot of different capabilities inside here. There's a map legend that kind of shows you, with the color coding and the statuses inside here. You've got a lot of abilities to kind of change map views. So you can move from, we've got a hybrid satellite now. You can move to a street view if you want to. So there's different map capabilities. But the whole point is that the attacher can go into this interface and find the pole they're looking for. So let me back this out. What you also have the ability to do is actually search for a pole as well. So if they know exactly where they want to put an attachment, they can actually put that information in. So if I say, um, so I've put in a street inside here. It has a match for it. Lo and behold, there's the pole that I want to attach onto. The same thing you can do in the mobile application as well. So I've already got this preloaded. So I'll select this. And when I do, you can see it's the exact same view, right? It's the same location. If I actually select the pole here, you can see it pops up with this little card in the left-hand corner. Same is true on the mobile app. When I tap the pole, you can see it shows up. So I mentioned to you the attacher, they've got two ways they can go about doing this. If you want to give them all the capability to actually be on site in front of the pole and start the process, they can do that with a mobile application. or they could collect the necessary information like the address or the poll ID, for example, and come back to the web interface to actually start the process and submit the application here. So you can see I've got this thing selected. There's an option for request attachment. First thing I'm going to do is actually I'm going to click on the details of this poll itself. And what we have inside of our application is we've got Street View automatically integrated inside here. So you can see that's the pole we're talking about. That's the pole that they want to put an attachment on. It's physically there. Interestingly enough, this pole, if I look over just down the street a little bit, there's another pole here that actually has a small cell on it. So there's an example. I wonder if they're billing for that. So you can see there's two examples right here, but this is indeed the pole that I want to actually put the attachment on itself. So I'm going to go ahead and just close this back out again. And let me go back to that again so you can see that process one more time. All right. So I've selected the pole. When I select the poll, I'll say request attachment. And what pops up is a request attachment. The same exact thing as you imagined would show up on the mobile interface as well. So again, mirroring the same processes over and over. So I'll hit done on, or I'll hit, excuse me, cancel on mobile so you can see the map interface there. So this is your form, right? This is the form that you'd want the actual attacher to fill out. So do you have an existing account? It's just an example as a starting point. Typically with inside these attachers, they have to already be in, for example, the ERP system. They've already got to be registered and inside the system itself. They usually typically have either the company name of the attacher and or an account number, something like that. So I'll just put in test one as the account number. And then usually you'd want to capture who the person is that's actually submitting this form. This could be a name, this could be an email address, whatever you want in terms of that information. The most critical thing is, well, what do they want to actually attach? So here's some examples for you. So if on this poll, for example, hey, I want to put in, we need to put a security camera inside here. That's what I'm looking to put inside there. So these would be your list of pre-approved attachments. If it's not on the pre-list, you certainly could hit other and you could capture more information of what they want to actually install. But think of this as your utility pre-approved attachment list. From there, you can say, okay, the attacher says, when do you want to install this thing? I want to install this thing on Friday. Well, it can come back with an error that basically said, no, you can't install this on Friday. This is a minimum of a 30-day process. So you can actually pop up warning messages inside here to guide the attacher down the right path to make sure they understand the process and the timeline and what's actually required of them. So, nope, can't install it on Friday. I got to go a month out. So I'll choose a month out, hit OK, and then that date is actually accepted. You can
So
put,
Jeff, let me make a comment here.
sure.
So everything he's showing there, these are all configurable workflows, which the workflow and the business logic around how much time you require for a security camera could be different than for a small cell. And you could factor that in. So clicking on the button would direct the requester to a different set of questions, but you configure all that. You define that, you script that, and we actually put that as part of your actual process. So what you're seeing can be changed for based upon your needs, your workflows, your type of attachments. And by the way, if that requester is in arrears or for whatever reason they're not a valid requester, you could let them know right there by looking that up at when they put their account number in and redirect them to contact you directly. So you have so much flexibility for how you map this process.
The last thing on this screen is a really oversimplification of upload relevant files. So you click on this and you can do the typical thing you kind of see everywhere nowadays is I can click and drag and drop a file inside here. So this is where you could actually set up based on attachment type. What are the required documents that have to be added to this? So you'd select those things, you'd hit upload, drop those. I'll hit add, and now that is inside there. So really bare bone basic example for you, but to give you an idea that again, you can put anything into this form based off of the process that you have today that might exist in a PDF document that can be translated into this interactive form that can be done from mobile or from the web. I hit submit. Again, you can pop up error messages, you can pop up additional information inside there to again communicate a status to the attacher. I'll hit continue. And so you probably, hopefully, just noticed that the color of this icon just turned from green to red. And what that's actually doing is that's showing that indeed now it's actually a reserve poll because I've submitted that application over there. Okay. So I'm going to hit done on that. So that gives you kind of a basic kind of feel for the attacher experience, what it possibly could be like. If I come over here to the actual other screen, think of it again as kind of the web management screen for all of the utility joint program people. Inside here, you've got all of the same information. Again, what I can do is the example that we just gave here was actually, let me start here by showing you at the very bottom here you can have different data types, right? And these are the assets. You have the poll, right, which is what the attacher wants to put something on. You have the attachment request of, well, an application has been submitted. So here's all of the application requests that are out. And then once it's installed, you've got, well, what are the actual attachments that are actually out there in the field themselves? So you can set up all of this. We set this up for you in TerraGo based off of your data structure of what types of assets you actually want to manage. And they're all coordinated. Well, you have to have a poll, and the attachment has to be on the poll. But before the attachment goes on the poll, you got to go through the attachment request process, the application. So all of this is kind of set up for you. So again, if I come over here and let me go back to polls here. And all of this information inside here is all filterable and searchable. So for example, let's look at like ownership. I can click on filter to say, okay, yeah, well, I just want to look at the polls that I own, the utility. I hit that, and what that's going to do is it not only changes the filter down inside the data table itself, it's going to actually update the map to only reflect those utility polls inside here. You can assign statuses, they can be connected to different projects. If we look for the one that I just did a few moments ago from an attachment standpoint, this is the one that we did. When I click on it, it immediately went to it on the map up above. So a simple click and there I'm right to that thing. Now, if I actually click on the details of this thing, again, you can see what the status actually is. You can see what the request is that came through and any notes associated to it. So this is what starts the internal process. An application has been submitted that now shows up in my view. So you can then go through that process of running it through your approval cycles. So um, again, this is from kind of the view of the person managing this. So this is like a poll, the attachments themselves. So if I scroll out here, actually, let me clear all this out. And I'll go back over here to attachments themselves. So you can start to scroll in and out based off a physical location. This is set up purposely kind of random so you could actually see all the different types of attachments that are out there. But you can kind of start to see, let me zoom out just a little bit. You can see the different types of icons there that represent different types of attachments that are there. So this is about managing the attachment yourself. So if I click on the attachment, same thing again, kind of zooms in. I can actually select the details of this thing. I can go through and actually get all the information that's about this poll. Some of this is coming again from the attacher, from the management team, but it's to populate your single source of view so you can see everything kind of in this one view. If I come back here to my demo one again, let me go back to this thing, go back to the demo one. Kind of the next step in the process is once the application is in, it's inside this system, then somebody's got to do some work on it. And you can see with it selected, now this card is moved into the next start of the workflow, which is initial review required. If I click on initial review required, this again, it will be your internal process of what needs to happen for this to actually get approved. So I'm going to say on this form, initial review approved, no. You've got some basically only one option to put some comments in. If I say yes, you can see these dynamic forms that start to generate to get information inside there. So application fee, has it been received yet? Override the application fee? No. If I say application fee has been received, okay, is the engineer ready for review? I can say yes. I can then assign it to an actual engineer. So here's a whole bunch of people inside here that are assigned as part of the team to do a review. We'll go ahead and we'll assign it to me. I'll say inside there, I can put in different comments. So again, think about this in terms of your process today, moving it to a digital format where now you're routing and assigning responsibilities for this attachment within inside the system itself. So if I hit submit, well, I need to fill out the information. I hit cancel instead and discard those changes. But you can see that's indeed how you kind of move to the next step of the process. So through all of these attachment requests, then you can have all of the kind of different statuses associated to them. So if I click inside here under the filter capabilities, and I can say, hey, this is the ones that I want to see. Of all of the ones in here, I'll just select them. I just want to see, for example, ones that are engineer review required. I hit apply. There's only 2 in here pending to show you that status. So that gives you an example of that. There's a lot more capabilities, certainly inside both of these applications for adding new poles, deleting poles, moving poles if the GPS location is in there. But probably the final thing to show you is analytics. One of the things that we find that's missing as well is you can build all these great tools, have all this great real-time visibility, but then people are still going to exporting CSVs and creating pivot tables or dumping it into Power BI in order to generate basic reporting around your joint use operation. Inside of TerraGo, we also come with analytics as part of every system, and this gives you the ability to actually highlight and automatically surface real-time data information based off of the data that's happening in real time. The minute you download an CSV to put in some other system, it's already out of date. This is actually the actual live information. So you can do things like, for example, this is a really large timeline. I'll shrink it down to just a few years, and hopefully you saw this date dynamic. Some of the information here dynamically updates, so you can track big picture stuff from total number of attachments over time. You can set up pie charts to kind of understand where all your attachments currently are. You can look at individual reports associated to individual users. How much have they completed in terms of the review? They have approved, they've canceled, they've terminated. And then you can look at things like month over month, where you can actually start to look at the growth of your attachments, where you can look at, okay, well, in September 2024, how many total requests did we get? How many were closed? How many were open? How many were canceled? Real basic example for you, but the idea is, again, you should be generating your KPIs directly from the system itself, not exporting it to another system to then run a different process from. Keep everything within that single pane of glass. Okay, what I encourage you to do is, it was a really high level demo, but showed you kind of a good feeling for some of the
Yeah.
capabilities from mobile web standpoint and from the attacher standpoint. If you want a more detailed demo, directly go through things like work orders and how exactly those are assigned and how those would work in terms of work that needs to be done around, for example, compliance. Get a hold of us. Glad to walk you through a more detailed demo in a private one-on-one session.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I know we went a little long and you might have questions, and hopefully we've said some things that really resonated with some of your issues. Obviously, we're passionate about this. We went a solid hour on this. It could have gone more. Love to talk to you. Reach out to us with questions. We'll set up demos. Tell us what your issues are, what you're seeing in the field, as we kind of build this library of history and experience in pole attachments. So, all right. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending. Reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you more. Thanks so much. Y'all take care.
Thank you.